Good morning, this is Pastor Jonathan with Robertsdale UMC. Welcome to today's Daily Devo as we continue to look at Jesus' words on the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. At the end of that sermon, he would say that anyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. And when the rains come and the streams rise and the winds blow and beat against that house, it will not fall. It will stand firm because it is built upon a solid foundation. Right now we are in a time where a lot of us are feeling like there's a lot of environmental factors crashing down on us. And so what a good time to remind ourselves of the strength of Christ's foundation in our lives, and especially his teachings in the Sermon on the Mount. So yesterday we looked at the Beatitudes. You can find that video on our Facebook page or our website or our YouTube channel. And I was really late yesterday. The day really got away from me. I had different appointments and commitments. So that video didn't get put out until about 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon. So I am thrilled to be with you this morning before I even go into the office to take a few minutes to just seek the Lord together and to gather with one another online in this way. So today we're going to look at Matthew chapter 5 verses 13 through 16. It's just a few verses, but I want to read it to you in a translation that you may not be familiar with, and that's Eugene Peterson's paraphrase of the Bible called The Message. This was a translation project that he actually started for his own congregation in Maryland. He wanted to try to put the Bible in the language of his congregation to give it a fresh understanding to the people he was ministering to. Let me tell you why you are here, Jesus says. You're here to be salt seasoning that brings out the God flavors of this earth. If you lose your saltiness, how will people taste godliness? You've lost your usefulness and will end up in the garbage. Here's another way to put it. You're here to be light, bringing out the God colors in the world. God is not a secret to be kept. We're going public with this, as public as a city on a hill. If I make you light bearers, you don't think I'm going to hide you under a bucket, do you? I'm putting you on a light stand. Now that I've put you here on a hilltop on a light stand, shine. Keep open house. Be generous with your lives. By opening up to others, you'll prompt people to open up with God, this generous Father in heaven. Sunday, we got to celebrate Holy Communion. And one thing that I'm always mindful of as we share the bread and the cup is that no matter what type of bread we're using, bread is comprised of a countless number of grains. Many grains form one loaf. Likewise, the cup, whether wine or grape juice, many grapes are pressed together to form the drink that we share. And that's how the body and blood of Christ are. Many grains, many grapes, forming one loaf, pressed together for one cup. And it just speaks of the diversity, the oneness, and the unity of the body of Christ. In our tradition, during the communion liturgy, we actually pray that God would make this be for us the body and blood of Christ, that we might be for the world the body of Christ redeemed by his blood. So in the same way that we receive the bread and the cup and we are reminded of the manyness and oneness of Christ's body, the church, we are to be broken and poured out for the world. We are to be crushed and broken and pressed. We are to be generous and pour ourselves out so that others can taste and see that the Lord is good. This goes right into what Jesus is talking about here in Matthew chapter 5. I love the way Eugene Peterson puts it. You're here to be salt seasoning that brings out the God flavors of this earth. You are the salt of the earth. You're here to be light, bringing out the God colors in the world. You are the light of the world. One winter, when my family was in Wilmore, Kentucky, attending seminary, it was our last year. We had our first child, so we were finishing up our seminary journey. Both of us lived about 11 or 12 hours north of anywhere else we had ever lived. We experienced blizzards for the first time in our lives. We experienced driving to work on a daily basis in ice and snow and having to learn how to drive in that because we didn't grow up somewhere where those skills were needed. And to top it all off, in the middle of a cold, bleak winter, our dryer went out in our modest little townhome, our drafty little townhouse. And I was in the midst of final exams, and I was just about to lose it. We had a 3-month-old, our dryer went out, life was stressful, and all I knew to do was to reach out to a Christian friend. And so I made an SOS call, and I'll never forget, as stressed out as I was, we had clothes hanging in every doorway of the little townhouse. We had our 3 months clothes, we had my wife's clothes, my clothes, and they were trying their best to dry in the cold, drafty air. And once they did air dry, they weren't much fun to put on, opening like stiff paper bags. But this friend chuckled as I told him the story. I found a used dryer on Craigslist for $75. And so finally we found one that we could afford. And my friend said, I tell you what, I'll come pick you up and I'll drive you out to get this dryer. So he came and he picked me up in his little white pickup truck. And as I told him all that was going on and all that stressed me out, he said, let's do this together. It'll be fun. And so in his little white pickup truck, he reassured me of my doubts and my fears of failure. He was a little further on the path of marriage and fatherhood, and he wasn't nearly as stressed out about my problems as I was. And most of all, he reminded me to keep the faith. And so we drove miles and miles through the ice and snow to this town that neither one of us was familiar with. We got lost several times, but we finally made it to this trailer in the middle of nowhere where we picked up this used dryer, drove it back to my townhouse, and installed it. And the point of this story is that this fellow member of the body of Christ, redeemed by his blood, gave time and energy to be broken and poured out into another drained soul. And I desperately needed a refill. And he was God's seasoning. He was God colors for me. And for that saint who probably thought he wasn't making a huge sacrifice, I still glorify my Father in heaven to the point that I am telling you this story today. So I would just encourage you today, this week, look for ways, simple ways, that you can make a difference just where you are, in the people around you, where you happen to be located today, in the things that you say and the choices you make. This is the challenge of Jesus. And anyone who builds their life on these words is like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. And not only will you find that your life is blessed and more stable, but you might even be a blessing and provide stability to others who desperately need it in this time. God bless you today. This is Pastor Jonathan. Grace and peace.